Today, we're doing a really critical deep dive. We're looking into sociological data that, frankly, challenges one of the most destructive narratives out there. The stereotype of the absent foundational Black American father.
Yeah, it's incredibly pervasive.
Our mission is pretty straightforward. We've gathered research, historical analysis, and solid federal stats. We want to see how this stereotype actually stacks up against, the reality of daily family life.
And let's be clear right from the start. The evidence. It shows Black men are, well, across many metrics, some of the most committed and involved fathers in the country. This isn't just like wishful thinking. We have specific data that really shatters this myth.
Okay, let's unpack this. To really get why this stereotype is so sticky, we have to look back, right? Where did this whole idea of familial irresponsibility even come from? And how did it get baked into policy?
Well, you have to understand its construction. Sources show this narrative wasn't accidental. It was deliberately built to rationalize systemic oppression. Its roots go way back. Slavery, obviously, which actively tore families apart. And then it continued through Jim Crow, with systemic disenfranchisement, mass imprisonment, all things used to push Black men out of their communities.
And that history, that sort of background radiation, it was formalized into policy. The most famous example is probably the 1965 Moynihan Report. That report really zeroed in on the supposed deterioration of the Black family. How did a government report end up having such a, devastating impact on policy?
It was a strategic pivot. The report essentially gave political cover. It shifted the focus away from the real systemic issues, Jim Crow, housing discrimination, economic barriers, and instead, it put the blame for poverty, for instability, squarely onto the perceived moral failings of Black fathers, painted them as irresponsible. And that framing, it became a super convenient excuse for inequality. Later on, it fed into things like the whole welfare queen myth, just deflected from the real problems.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Let's dig into the actual numbers, the concrete evidence that just completely refutes that narrative. We're talking Centers for Disease Control and Prevention data, CDC data, comparing daily father involvement across different groups for fathers living with their children. 70%. 70% of Black fathers reported bathing, dressing, or diapering their young kids daily. Compare that to 60% for white fathers. It's higher.
Significantly higher.
And then look at education, helping with homework. 41% of these Black fathers did that every day.
Every single day.
Versus 28% of white fathers. Again, a really stark difference.
And what's so fascinating, what this data really shows, is Black fathers dedicating their time, their energy, acting as these vital protective forces. They're absolutely no less involved. Yeah. And like you said, in many of these sort of daily nurturing tasks, often more involved. Plus, even when fathers don't live in the home, non-residential Black fathers, involvement stays remarkably high. One big study found about 51% had a high involvement profile.
That high involvement, it just clashes so dramatically with the harmful stereotype that extends beyond absence, right? The idea of the Black man as an inherent threat. That perception is used to justify, the carceral state, disproportionate surveillance of families.
Exactly. And that bias, it translates directly into real policy harm. Actual harm against children. Think about this. Black children are almost twice as likely as white children to end up in foster care.
Twice as likely.
Yeah, even when they had the same objective risk factors for maltreatment. That disparity, it's largely driven by racial bias. Bias rooted in that assumption that the family structure is unstable because the father is, quote-unquote, absent or uninvolved.
And we absolutely have to tackle the dangerous Black man trope head on too. If you look at federal sentencing data, fiscal year 2021, who makes up the overwhelming majority of convicted sexual abuse offenders in the federal system?
Tell us.
White men. 57.5%. The data just flat out doesn't support the fear-mongering stereotype that targets Black men as the primary danger to kids. It's just not true.
The facts paint a very different picture.
So what does this all mean? I think the core takeaway here is pretty clear. This pervasive story, the absent Black father narrative, it's historically constructed, it's born from racist ideology, and it's factually wrong. The evidence shows foundational Black American fathers are highly engaged, they're deeply nurturing, and they provide this absolutely crucial buffer against adversity for their kids.
Right. So here's something to really think about. A final thought for you, the listener. Since the data consistently shows Black fathers are often more involved in that day-to-day hands-on caregiving than other groups, ask yourself this. What kind of societal changes, what kind of policy shifts might we see if the media, if public discourse actually stopped trying to explain away deep socioeconomic inequalities by scapegoating the proven strength and commitment within the Black family unit? What would that look like?